Most people think the way to deal with negative thoughts is simple. You try to stop them, and eventually your mind becomes quiet. That's what we expect, but notice what actually happens when you try. The moment you push a thought away, another one appears, stronger, louder, more persistent. And the more you try to control your mind, the less control you seem to have until it starts to feel restless, almost overwhelming, like your mind is working against you. So you turn to something like breathing meditation. You focus on the breath, hoping it will calm everything down, and sometimes it does, for a moment. But then the thoughts return, and it feels like you're back where you started. And slowly, a quiet doubt appears. Maybe this just doesn't work for me. But what if the problem is not your mind, and not even the thoughts? What if the problem is how you're trying to control them? And what if the solution is not control, but something much simpler, something like counting? So maybe the goal was never to stop your thoughts in the first place, and maybe that's where everything begins to shift. Because thoughts will come and go. That's simply what the mind does, just like the lungs breathe and the heart beats. The real problem is not that thoughts appear, it's that we get pulled into them, we follow them, we become them without even noticing. And once that happens, it feels like you are inside the storm, instead of watching it. So instead of trying to fight the mind, there's another way, a much quieter way. You give the mind something simple to rest on, something steady, something always here. The breath. And with it, a gentle rhythm, counting each inhale, each exhale, not to control the experience, but to guide your attention. This is not a trick, and it's not about forcing calm. It is a very old practice, rooted in Zen, simple on the surface, but deeply transformative. Because slowly, almost unnoticed, you begin to step out of the thoughts and into awareness itself. So if thoughts don't stop when you try to stop them, it can start to feel like something is wrong with you, like your mind is too busy, too restless, maybe even out of control. But look a little closer, because something very simple is happening here. Every time a thought appears, your attention moves toward it, almost automatically, and the moment attention touches a thought, it gives it energy. The thought grows, it connects to another, and before you notice, you are already carried away. Then you try to push it back, to resist it, to make it disappear, but that movement itself is still attention. And the mind reads that attention as a signal that this thought matters, that it is important, that it needs to stay. So it returns, stronger this time, more convincing, more difficult to ignore. And this is where the struggle begins, because it feels like you are fighting your own mind and losing. But you are not failing, not at all. This is simply how the mind works. It follows attention. It amplifies what you engage with. So the more you fight your thoughts, the more you unknowingly feed them, and the more real they begin to feel. So instead of trying to push thoughts away, you begin to do something very different, something much more gentle. You give your attention a place to rest, not by force, but by invitation. The breath is always here, steady, quiet, moving on its own, whether you notice it or not. And when you begin to follow it, something subtle starts to change. You are no longer pulled into every thought because your attention has somewhere else to go. And this is where counting comes in, not as a way to control the mind, but as a way to stay with the breath. You inhale and softly count 1, you exhale and count 2, continuing like this, slowly, naturally, until you reach 10, and then you begin again. It is very simple, almost surprisingly simple, and yet that simplicity is what makes it work. Because the mind needs just enough structure to remain present, not too much, not too little. You are not suppressing thoughts, and you are not trying to get rid of them. You are gently guiding your attention, again and again, back to something stable, something real. And over time, the pull of thoughts begins to soften, not because they disappear, but because your attention is no longer caught inside them. And at some point, you will lose the count, almost without noticing. The numbers fade, and suddenly you are thinking again, carried into a story, a memory, a worry. And usually, this is the moment where frustration appears, where it feels like you did something wrong, like you couldn't stay focused, like the mind has taken over again. But look more closely, because something important just happened. The moment you realize you lost the count, that is not failure, that is awareness returning. In that instant, you are no longer inside the thought, you are seeing it. And that moment, as small as it seems, is the heart of the practice. Because you will lose count again and again, that is not a problem, that is the practice itself. Each time you notice and gently return to the breath, to the next number, you are weakening the habit of being carried away. Not by force, not by control, but by remembering. So the practice is not about counting perfectly, it is about noticing when you forget and beginning again, softly, without judgment. And over time, something shifts, not because you stop thinking, but because you are no longer lost in every thought that appears. And slowly, you begin to notice that this is not something that only exists when you sit down to meditate. It starts to appear in the middle of your day, in ordinary moments you would usually overlook. You might be lying awake at night, thoughts moving in circles, one leading into the next, and without trying to force anything, you return to the breath, counting softly, 1, 2, 3. Or you are about to enter a conversation, feeling tension in your body, your mind already imagining what might go wrong, and again, you come back, one breath, one count, just enough to steady yourself. Even while walking, or waiting, or sitting on a train, the same pattern appears, thoughts pulling you away, and then the quiet remembering, the gentle return. And this is where the practice becomes something deeper, because you begin to see that you are not trying to create a perfect state of calm, you are learning a skill. The ability to notice when attention is lost, and to return again and again without resistance. And over time, this begins to change how you move through life, not because thoughts disappear, but because you are no longer carried away every time they arise. And after some time, something very quiet begins to change, not suddenly, not all at once, but gently, almost in the background. The thoughts are still there, they still appear, just as they always have, but they no longer carry the same weight. They come and they pass, without pulling you in as easily. And in between those thoughts, small spaces begin to open, moments of stillness you didn't create, moments where nothing needs to be fixed or controlled. At first, they are easy to miss, but the more you return, the more natural they become. And you start to notice something subtle, but important. You are not inside the thoughts in the way you once believed. They move through awareness, but they are not what you are. And from this, a different kind of peace appears, not because the mind becomes silent, but because you are no longer carried away every time it speaks. So in the end, it comes back to something very simple, something that has been here all along. You don't need to control your thoughts, and you don't need to force your mind to become quiet. You don't need perfect focus, because that was never the point. All you need is this moment, this breath, and the willingness to begin again. One inhale, one count, one exhale, the next number, nothing more than that. And even if you lose track, even if the mind wanders, you simply return gently, without judgment. Because this is always available to you, not just in meditation, but in any moment you remember. So try it, just for a minute today, without expectations, without trying to achieve anything. And then simply notice what changes, not by force, but by attention returning one breath at a time.